Thank you for everyone who has joined us. This is Black History Boot Camp. I am your co-host for today, Vanessa. I'm the co-founder of Girl Trek, a beautiful movement of over 1 million Black women. We are in a fight for our lives and a fight for the lives of our friends and families, and we believe that walking in movement is the pathway towards deep freedom and deep liberation, and we organize around that idea. And for the month of November, we are doing a 21-day walking meditation series called Black History Boot Camp. It is me and my girl Morgan. Are you there, Morgan? If she's not on yet, y'all.
I was on mute.
Oh.
I'm here. I was trying to keep it quiet over here, trying to keep it quiet and peaceful because there's some trucks going by, some dust. Trying to keep it peaceful. I'm here.
Well, it's good to hear your voice, Morgan. I'm sure all the women are happy. Morgan and I walk and talk together about history. We walk and talk across continents. I'm currently in DC. Morgan is on the west coast of Africa. And we are joined by women, men, allies, all sorts of people from all over the world calling in.
I'm definitely in South Carolina. I'm definitely in South Carolina.
Oh, what? Oh, y'all, Morgan out there working. Oh, okay. I don't know where Morgan is, but she's somewhere, y'all. She's somewhere. She's walking. I don't know where you are walking.
No, I'm in Africa. I don't need people knowing where I am all the time. I got to duck and move. Sometimes I'll be there. Sometimes I'll be here. I'm still here. I'm just messing with Vanessa. Yeah. I almost didn't make this call because I was trying to, hydrate real quick so I could get out on this road. And I was like, let me run to the bathroom. I got on this tight ass jumpsuit. I was just like, we got a new producer on today. Shout out to China. She ain't new. She's been a leader in this movement forever. Shout out to you, China. Thank you for the work that you do. And yeah, so I was like, China gonna have to get me on at the last minute, but I heard James Cleveland. So I'm here. Can't wait to hear your story.
I almost didn't make it to the call either, y'all. I didn't plug in my phone. The phone is the tool for the revolution by which we actually do these conversations. It is my tool, and it was on red. And then my man was like, I told you to plug your phone in. And I was just like, do you think now's the time to tell me this? So now, here I am plugged in on the side of my building so that I am looking at some beautiful fall colors so that we can have a beautiful conversation today. But I will get out and actually walk once my phone is on green. I'm so grateful, though, for the women who've been on this journey with us and who've logged in today. Thank you for choosing yourself. You are totally worth it. We are worth it. We're going to be here for a little over 30 minutes in a conversation. This conversation, I hope, brings some joy to your life. I hope it brings some ease to your body. I hope you feel the sisterhood and the companionship of Black History Boot Camp. And I hope you come back tomorrow, and I hope you invite a friend when you do. But for those of us who are here today, I am excited about today's conversation because just like Lucy Parsons, who we talked about on Monday, who I covered, Morgan, I did not know about today's subject in depth. And I'm so happy that I'm going to get to talk about him today. His name is Ralph Bunche. Do you know who Ralph Bunche is?
Yes, I do.
All right. Good, because then you would have corrected me if I said his name wrong.
No. I don't know that. I only know his name, and I only know a few sort of details, but I don't really know that much about his life, so I have a lot to learn. But I will help if I can. I'll help if I can.
All right. Awesome. And even if you can't, Morgan, this is a broader conversation for us out there because every single day we're asking the questions, the essential questions that are building for us a repertoire, an understanding, a North Star around how we show up. And so we've been asking questions that don't have easy answers. Some of the questions are both and questions. Some of the questions are either or questions. Today's question is about when do we confront things and when do we negotiate? And I actually want to start this conversation with a different Black man named James Baldwin, because I was thinking about James Baldwin's quote, Morgan, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I start here with this quote because I hope this conversation is a catalyst for some woman on this call who needs to face something. and to know that we cannot change the things in our life until we confront them head on and genuinely face them. And then you can have a decision point around if you're going to negotiate, if you're going to step away, but you can't even begin to make decisions about your life if you are letting things stay in the shadows, if you are not making eye contact, if you are not allowing yourself to be uncomfortable, and if you are so wounded by the uncomfortability of life that you don't know how to cultivate resilience to keep bouncing back, quite frankly. So I really hope I have a lot of things I need to confront still. I'm confronting things every day, and I was asking this for myself because I was like, this is a really good question. So I hope all of you out there think about the things that you need to face, and let's all think about those things, because I love James Baldwin. And James Baldwin is going to be related a little bit to the Ralph Bunche story a little bit later on.
What you got to confront? Like this now sounds like.
First of all, well, I ain't saved into my 401k. I ain't saved into my 401k in 5 years, y'all. Look, I just want to let you know, I'm overwhelmed by the concept. I'll be getting the email from Kalima. She'd be like doing those gentle hits. She'd be like, I highly would recommend people to choose this option. We even match. And like, I feel so overwhelmed by the concept of money. And I feel so uncertain about the future that I'm practicing habits of my own family where I'm just like, I don't know about that 401k, but I'm stashing this money over here, on the couch, this, or spending it. It's crazy. So that's just one thing that just popped into my mind. And again, I got a lot of other things. So.
That's good. That's good. That's a good example.
I'm gonna let you think about what you're trying to confront, and then I'm gonna ask you in a minute. And quite frankly, y'all, we weren't even gonna take calls on this. I wasn't gonna take calls today for this story, but *9, if you have something that you want to confront, if you have something that you want to confront, and you're just like, you know what, if I speak it right now, because that felt brave for me. I promise I didn't have that answer canned, but it's just true. If something is at the bottom right now underneath your belly button, and it's like that feeling, that sinking feeling, you're like, ooh, what is it? And you don't want to make eye contact with that thing that is the thing, go towards it. And *9, if you want to be brave and air out what that is on this call. But I'm going to start this story. You know? Okay,
yeah. Vanessa, my brain is wired differently. I don't even look at confrontation as confrontation. It'd just be everyday conversation, and people think it's confrontation because I don't actually hold anything back ever. And it's a part of my brain. I'm neurodivergent. You know what I mean? And I'm not normative at all. I never have been, and it makes for a very spicy and interesting life. And my last man was also like me, so we just told the truth all the time. We didn't hold nothing back.
There you go.
Very spicy. So there's not that much, honestly. And I'm not trying to be no kind of way. And I understand this is a tension, and I understand it's probably a tension I need more of how to negotiate, hold back, like not say, you know, just because it's the truth don't mean it's loving. You know what I mean? Like these, and exercise some like impulse control around my ability to say things. I probably need a little bit more of that discipline, but I don't. Like, oh no, I'll be saving. I'll be confronting everything and making decisions rapidly.
Yes, you do. And I. No, you do.
The best decisions, as you also know.
But they're brave. But they are brave. And
they are brave. They are brave. Thank you. But I'm not saving for my 501 either. But it was a decision because I thought I could make more money like in the real estate market. I was like, I'm gonna put this into this little flip. I bought this little house on the beach. I was just like, I put this in a little flip, and I thought I was making a decision. And in retrospect, I probably should have followed Kalima. So we're just on very different ends of the spectrum there, which makes us a good team actually, because you're incredibly deliberate. Like you measure 4 times and cut once, and then I just intuit the measurement, and then I just cut immediately. So I'm saying it makes us a good team.
It does make us a good team. It does make us a good team. Yeah. Well, I love that. And even before we start with Ralph Bunche's story, I want to talk briefly about 2 men who exemplify both options of choices. One man who really believed in deep negotiation, and one man who believed in deep confrontation. And then China says we got a hand raised. So look, y'all, if you got *9, if this even inspires you, we'll bring on a few people in a minute. But I want to start this story here, Morgan. I want to start the story December 10th, 1964 in Oslo, Norway. On that day, Martin Luther King Jr. received the Nobel Peace Prize for his leadership in the American Civil Rights Movement. He was notorious and famous, of course, for confronting the systemic racism of the U.S. through nonviolent resistance, through marches, sit-ins, boycott speeches that really, I would say, pierced the conscience of the nation. And his method of nonviolent confrontation drew power from the moral high ground, forcing the world to witness the brutality of segregation and the humanity of those who had suffered under it. On the flip side, though, Morgan, just 1 year, it's kind of loud where you are, or somebody is.
I'm not even, listen, no, I'm gripped by your story. I was like, did she write that? That was very eloquent. Very eloquent.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to go on mute.
Hold on, I don't mind the atmosphere, but yes, but come off you when you have something to say. So Morgan, just 1 year before Martin Luther King in Oslo accepted that Nobel Peace Prize, I want everybody to know that children were being hosed down and attacked by police dogs in full view of the world. He had delivered his speech, I Have a Dream speech, and he had said that a man who won't die for something is not fit to live. And yet he just deeply believed in nonviolence. And there were a lot of people who, when he was receiving that Nobel Peace Prize, couldn't get out of their heads those children and those dogs and those fire hoses. And there was a question around negotiating the peace and at what cost and at whose cost we were doing it. I'm not even going to talk about that yet, though, Morgan, because I want to fast forward to Oslo again, October 15th, 1993. That's where Nelson Mandela shared the Nobel Peace Prize with F.W. de Klerk for his work on dismantling apartheid in South Africa. By the time that Nelson Mandela had gotten the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, he had spent 27 years in prison. He was convicted of sabotage as a leader of the ANC's armed wing. And Mandela believed that peaceful resistance alone wasn't enough to confront apartheid. So Mandela had a specific confrontation strategy, Morgan, and it's talked about in books and movies and everything. He was bold, he was strategic, he oversaw a campaign that targeted government infrastructure, power plants, railways. He calculated attacks that he said minimized harm to human life, but sent a clear message to the apartheid regime that they were about their business. And when he was sentenced to life in prison in 1964, he used his trial to confront the world. And he declared, I have fought against white domination and I have fought against Black domination in an ideal for which I am prepared to die. So he was super clear around confrontation being his method immediately for what he believed was going to be the liberation of people in South Africa. And even, I didn't actually know this part about Nelson Mandela, but even after decades behind bars, Nelson Mandela remained unbroken. And in 1985, while he was actually in jail, he rejected an offer for conditional release, stating that only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts, he said. So his defiance became a rallying cry for global anti-apartheid movement. So I want us to imagine that we have Martin Luther King, who we all celebrate for his nonviolent stance, and he received that Nobel Peace Prize in 1963 or 1964, 1 year after in 1963, the hose and the fire hose was on the children and people were watching, and he had given this I Have a Dream speech. And then I want you to imagine that Mandela in prison spent 27 years there, and in 1985 could have gotten out of prison and said only free men can negotiate, and that a prisoner cannot enter into contract. So he was like, what plea deal? And he just stood his ground on that. And these stories really matter because Martin Luther King was not the first Black man to get the Nobel Peace Prize. Nelson Mandela was not the first Black man to get the Nobel Peace Prize. The first Black man to get the Nobel Peace Prize was a quiet trailblazer. His name was Ralph Bunche. Before there was Selma, before Robbins Island and Mandela, Bunche became the first Black person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And he did it, Morgan, in a really, it's so relevant to today's conversation around ceasefire, right? So let's think about what we're trying to negotiate right now when we are thinking about the Israeli-Palestine war. So his work wasn't in the streets and it wasn't in the prisons. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for being in rooms filled with world leaders who didn't always, one, value his presence as a Black man. But he negotiated in 1949 the armistice agreement that ended the first Arab-Israeli war. It wasn't glamorous work. He said it was tedious. He said it was frustrating, but he did it. And he did it at the cost of great, great criticism. This is where James Baldwin, and I'm going to bring in W.B. Du Bois and a Paul Robeson. A lot of people use the story of Ralph Bunche to say this is the problem with negotiation. And this is a theme that's been throughout even some of our conversations, but especially is relevant right now as we are talking about the war, and not just the war, by the way, in Israel and Palestine, but wars around the world, conflicts around the world. And what is it going to take for us actually to end what's happening, bullets flying at the planes in Haiti? What is it going to take for us to end what's happening in the Congo and all around the world? Is it going to be negotiating at the table, or is it going to be Nelson Mandela says that we need to do some deep confrontation out there in these streets in order to bring things about? So, Morgan, are you there, Morgan?
I'm here.
Awesome. So today we're going to explore this question through the story of Ralph Bunche. I love learning about him. First of all, shout out to UCLA. He was a Bruin. And I didn't know that part. And I feel like I know all the famous Black Bruins, but I'm going to even back up from there because shout out to Detroit, Michigan. Ralph Bunche is a son of Detroit, Michigan. He was born in 1904 during the height of the Jim Crow era. His father abandoned his family, and by the age of 13, both of his parents had died. He was raised by his grandmother, Morgan Lucy Taylor, and she instilled in him that if he got an education, it would be his pathway to freedom. And Ralph Bunche literally was a genius. And even in Jim Crow era schools, people recognized that he was a genius. By 1927, he had graduated summa cum laude from UCLA. He earned a degree in international studies, and then he went on to become the first Black person to earn a PhD in political science from Harvard University in 1934. And his dissertation come through Ralph Bunche focused on the French colonial rule in Africa and critiquing the injustices of it. So he was, from the beginning, he said, at Harvard, he was a freedom fighter. He understood deep injustices. He did his entire PhD and thesis. And Harvard at the time, the first Black man to even get a PhD, and he got it in political science, and he wrote the dissertation around French colonial rule in Africa. It caused a huge uproar actually on the Harvard campus because talk about confronting things. A lot of our educational institutions, especially Black men, but even now don't want to confront their own very complicated past around colonialism and how they actually obtained even their own wealth and how they built up the capacities on their campuses. Including, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Morgan, but Georgetown University paid reparations to Georgetown University, which is run by a bunch of like Catholic priests and nuns. They actually sold a group of enslaved people to actually fund the building of the campus. And just recently, in like the last 5 to 10 years, they have paid reparations to those families and offered free tuition and all sorts of things to their descendants.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Georgetown, and I'm learning so much about Ralph Bunche. I thought W.B. Du Bois was the first PhD. It could be
well, in political science.
Maybe
so he might have got.
Oh, political science. Okay.
Yeah. I think W.B. Du Bois got something else, but Ralph Bunche was the first person to get a degree in political science.
Is there a school named after him at Howard?
It's a very good question. I don't know that part, but if somebody does know.
Somewhere. Yeah. One of the universities has like Ralph Bunche International School of Political something. I don't know if it's Howard or Harvard, but I've seen it somewhere. Somebody could look it up.
Okay. Yes, please look it up if you know Star 9 or text us. So after he left Harvard, Morgan, he left. It was just what you talking about. He left. It's hard out there for him. Like it was the Jim Crow era. I don't look. Never ask permission to save your own life. This is a deep question. I don't want to shift the conversation, but even in thinking about that, we do have responsibility to our children, and some of our parents, I think, were literally dying under the responsibility, dying on the end. I don't know why he left.
I was just like, dang. I mean, you just rolled over that like that wasn't a big deal, and I'm like, it's kind of not a big deal, and it's sad to me. And like, what do you do when you're sitting on your couch and your son is getting a Nobel Peace Prize?
That's so true. And did he even know? Right. Did he even know? I used to think this about my own dad. I used to be like, did he know I graduated UCLA? Did he know I got this job? And I always had this idea that one day I was going to be able to circle back with him. He was going to know all these things, but he died. And this was like, I don't know if he knew or he didn't know, but I just reconciled it and moved on. And Morgan, you're right.
Well,
China
when we went on,
Oh, go ahead.
China said what?
She said Ralph J. Bunche International Affairs Center at Howard University. So you were right. He does have a school named after him in Howard.
Look at that old memory kicking in. I was going to say, we was on what was it, Today Show, Good Morning America. What was we on? Today Show. We was on the Today Show. You know, everything I do is so my dad can recognize me and give me credit.
Yeah.
That's my whole life. My childhood wounds. It's like, maybe if I do this, my daddy won't leave my mama. You know, and it's just kind of what it is. But I don't reconcile with it. Have to get therapy. But, you know, we went on that show. I ain't thought nothing about the Eddie James. And then my sister texted me the week, Lisa, who's on the bus at the stressful test. Half of y'all know her. Shout out to Lisa. She called herself Alicia because she's brand new now. Okay, so great. She sent it to me like, oh, I'm so proud of you, sister. I said, where did you get this? She said, Dad texted it to me. What? He ain't said a lift of congratulations. He ain't said a look of he's proud. He ain't made eye contact, but he's sending it out to other people. Do you see what I mean? And I realized that actually his acknowledgement meant something to me because I didn't think it did, but because I was mad that he was sending.
Not only do I see what you're talking about, but you also confronted him, Morgan. You did. Eventually, you were just like, so even you, that's like you have moved. You have gotten some gains from it, but like there was a time where I think you was like, what do I do with my daddy? And then you were just like, let me tell you all these things. You read me the text one time. It was like, boom, 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 Dad. And I just made it like,
I always be telling him. He loves it. He loves it. He's like, because it feels like he has the opportunity for redemption. Because I confront him, but I do confront him with love. But I be like, this be hurting my feelings when you be doing this kind of stuff, Dad. And he's just like, well, baby girl, I just didn't want to disturb you. And I'm just like, no, you trying to get the receipt without that work.
Yeah. It's hard to confront our parents. It's hard. It's hard.
It is. Sorry, keep going. This is good. Thank you, China, for that.
No.
That's great.
I don't want to sidetrack on this, actually. Yes, let me stay on track. I'm going to stay on track on this story. Actually, China, do we still have the caller on? And if we do, go ahead and bring her on now. I want to hear her, hear what they are confronting. I'm saying this because that just triggered something when you were just talking about your dad, Morgan. And I was thinking about my auntie, and I told you this. I love my auntie to death. I have a lot of aunties. China says not aunt. I have a lot of aunties, and my auntie Peggy, God rest her soul, every single time I walk into the house, she has a criticism about the way I look. And she doesn't, I don't think she understood it, and I don't think she meant it, but it really, really, really has impacted me my whole life. And it just happened. I told Morgan we were going to Atlanta for TED, and I got my hair done, and when I walked in the house, she was like, you got to go somewhere to get that done? And I mean, I was so deflated. I was so hurt. And she did it again just recently, 2 or 3 days ago, and I just told her directly right when she did it that it hurt my feelings. I was just like, why would you say that? Yeah, I was just like, why would you say that? And then she was like, I was like, no, why would you say that? Because that's a very mean thing to say. And she tried to explain it like in a loving way. And she was like, I got some red in my hair. She's like, well, you didn't definitely need to do that. And I was just like, don't. That's like, it's so hurtful. And I confronted it. So shout out to everybody who is confronting the authority figures in their life, the parents in their life. Also, to confront is to genuinely, James Baldwin actually said this, Morgan, and I know you deeply believe this. He said to confront is an act of love. To tell the truth in confrontation is an act of actual love. And so the idea that actually I was holding this hurt in my heart all this time from my aunt for all these ways she was being hurtful, but wasn't confronting her about it, actually wasn't the act of love. So the act of love was to tell her in that moment this was really hurting me.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. And I know she loves you. And I actually know that like half the time when we criticize other people, it's our own internal dialogue around risk taking, around our own looks and our own stuff, and like wanting to keep one another safe. Like sometimes her criticism is her act of love, even trying to keep you like in the bounds of what she thinks is respectable and safe. And it is a negotiation, right? You have to tell her, yeah, I see that, Auntie, and this is the style I'm choosing for myself. And by the way, I think it looks beautiful. I'm so proud of you, Vanessa. No, you've been standing up. That's what I'm saying.
And it ain't easy, y'all, but you got to do it. Yeah, like, look, I put all my people
to be like, no, Marga, no. Like, damn, I was just trying to say. I was going to call you today. We had a meeting, and I said, Vanessa, I know you're being compassionate. You go, no, I'm not being compassionate. I'm being so damn. Maybe put that muscle away.
I know.
But I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Yeah, I am proud of you.
I'm proud of it. Inspired by all the people, quite frankly. I'm not joking. Inspired by the conversations we've been having about Black History Boot Camp. That's what I'm saying. I know for a fact every woman who decided to find time to come on here at noon today, like I know for a fact we are changing our lives, and like even in sometimes it's like big leaps that we can see and sometimes incremental, but these stories are really inspiring me. And as I'm saying, I didn't know about Ralph Bunche, but he was so cool with it. He, like Ralph Bunche specifically, he hated media attention. He hated the spotlight. He hated being talked about. He literally was behind the scenes and undercover, but he moved in such deeply intentional ways, Morgan. After he left Harvard, his career exploded in the 1940s. He joined, just imagine this, imagine in the 1940s that this Black man joined the US State Department, and he helped to draft pivotal documents that were the founding of the United Nations, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. He worked closely with Eleanor Roosevelt to shape the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, ensuring that it spoke to the injustices of both racism and colonialism, tying back to what he wrote his dissertation on and his PhD on. So much of the United Nations' entire ethos and culture was actually drafted and shaped intentionally by Ralph Bunche in the 1940s. And he was working.
And this is interesting because this reminds me of the woman. Remind me her name again. The labor
Lucy Parsons.
Worker.
Yes, Lucy.
Lucy Parsons. This reminds me of her because I remember that he got some criticism around the formation of this International Human Rights Committee, and it wasn't including things like lynching in the U.S. And so even drawing all these ties between Paul Robeson, between, what's his name, Bayard Rustin, even later on, and what's the guy from the Pullman Porters? It was all at the same time. A. Philip Randolph and all these people were sometimes critical that these international, Malcolm X was actually critical too, that a lot of this human rights, sorry, my neighbors is pumping some music so loud, but these international agendas didn't include the agenda of Black liberation. And so it's tricky, even when you were talking
You could have been reading my notes, Morgan. You could have been reading my notes because literally W.E.B. Du Bois specifically criticized Bunche for working with the white-dominated State Department. He specifically criticized Bunche for his lack of radicalism necessary to truly change the colonial and radical oppression. Specifically, Paul Robeson accused Bunche of being complicit in imperialism, and especially during the early Cold War. And then specifically, Malcolm X, who was actually a little bit later in his time, used Ralph Bunche, though, as an example to say, I'm not going to be like that Negro. I'm not going to be at the Negro negotiating table. And he was often referencing Ralph Bunche. So no, he had deep and genuine criticism in his time. And yet he did something so powerful because
but I want you to say one thing. Let me just say one thing. Yeah, let me just finish one thing, because this is the issue, not just with Parsons or with Ralph Bunche, but even you were talking about Nelson Mandela, and when we did the story on Miriam Makeba, she hated that he got the Nobel Peace Prize. She said, "Why is he on the stage with the enemy?" Yeah, because she was just like, they took your life away. People are still oppressed. People are still in townships. She had deep criticism for this kind of performance of peace when equality and justice was not present in the everyday lives of South Africans. And so she was very vocal about that. So, I mean, it's just, But still, do we consider Mandela a hero? So, I mean, I think we could hold space for Ralph Bunche too for the systems changing work he was doing. So it's sophisticated and it's complicated, but I'm appreciating this. Keep going. Sorry. I'm
gonna tell you who was. Yeah, and I didn't know that about Mary McCabe and Mandela. So no, this is knitting it together in my head too. And the people who, we could have all the criticism we want, but I want you to imagine that you're on the ground and you're a part of the Arab-Israeli war and how happy you were that he negotiated that peace. I want you to imagine that your family is the one running from the mouth of the shark. I want you to imagine that right now people are like, however we can get some food on the table, however we can get some safety, however we can get these buildings to stop dropping. I think people are just looking for deep solutions. So yeah, I agree.
It's like history rewrites who's radical. History rewrites who's radical and who's mainstream, because as we talked about in the first episode, like right after the election, half of our friends were not even voting in this election, not voting for the first Black female presidential major ticket candidate, not voting because they could not get down with what was happening in Palestine. And so it's just like, and so half the community was like, I know, but this is a moment for Black people. Like, this is where we have to have solidarity for us. And people were like, and we ain't gonna do that. We ain't gonna do that right now here, because there's bigger systems that need to be changed. And so there's a sophisticated conversation to have. And this is the last thing I'll say, Vanessa. I was concerned when I went to bed last night about this series. I was just like, are we presenting too much tension at a time where people just need resolution and inspiration? Like, we keep asking these hard questions, but I went to sleep at peace that no, we are building muscle to hold the tension required so that we can have the kind of philosophy that is sophisticated enough for what's ahead. We have to interrogate our positionality. We have to interrogate our strategy, and we have to learn from history what people did well and what people did not. So it's hard, and I feel unsettled, and people don't be raising their hands on this call because everybody feels unsettled. But these are such good conversations. So thank you for doing Ralph Bunche. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel you, and I feel the same way. I was just like, I'm grappling every day, even trying to put these stories together. And yet I'm like, we're 8 seasons deep, and I did not know Lucy Parsons or Ralph Bunche. And that's intentional by design if you understand the conversation we're having around the educational system. And to your point, who we lift up as heroes and who we don't. And they give us just enough palatable stories. They give us just enough 28 days in February. They give us just enough MLK streets for us to feel like we understand the stories, we understand what's happening, but there was so much that we do not understand. And I'm telling you, y'all, Morgan and I be doing deep research. So I'm saying, like, I'm just like, there's so many people we could be talking about, and there's so many situations we could be talking about. And almost these are the more essential stories than the easier conversations, the hero stories, the foremother stories, the feel-good stories. It's the harder questions because we really are in it right now. And I don't think there's going to be an easy way out. There is not. We can't eat sheet cake our way out of how we're feeling right now. I tried that. We're going to really have to figure out some actual answers right now and get a community together and figure out what's going on. Yeah. Yeah.
No, when Peter Tosh was like divest from the entire health system and go back to herbal medicine, that's a real conversation. It's a real conversation, and I'm saying, and don't nobody halfway even know his name. But he had the whole Rasta movement divesting from all that stuff and trying to heal themselves with like food way a long time ago. So I'm saying these people were radical, and no, they weren't all heroes, but they were radical in their philosophy and their thinking. So this is great.
Yeah, they were. I'm going to finish the story of Ralph Bunche, but we have a sister on who raised her hand, and I just want to bring you in. Brave sister, what's your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Letitia, and I'm calling from Kent, Ohio. And I just wanted you to know that you are building us up to confront things. I appreciate this the whole time. I've been on every day making time for it, because as I'm resting and resisting, I need to be empowered, and I need knowledge. And the things that you guys are bringing out and letting us know about the people, the unsung people, the people that we don't know about in our history, is empowering us to be ready for the fight we're about to embark on, because it's going to be a fight. So I just want you to know that I appreciate it. I'm feeling, more uplifted. I am feeling more empowered, but I am still resting right now. But I appreciate the walks, because it's allowing me to deal with the, people at my university, the PWI that I work in, and it's allowing me to be able to, you know, rejuvenate myself, knowing that my ancestors were in it. And there are ones that are like me who are unsung, and people may not know what they did, but you guys are allowing us to have that knowledge. And I just appreciate it. So that's all I wanted to say. And I thank you, ladies, and everybody on the call, and I love you all.
I love
oh,
you
man, thank
I
you.
I love you too. I was about to talk junk. I have instant karma. I was about to talk junk to you because while you whisper PWI, I was like, we stay whispering white people. Because, you know, white people. I was about to talk junk and then I stepped in some mud. I was like, leave this woman alone. She's giving you a shout out. Thank you so much for that love. Love right back to you. Love right back to you. Thank you for resting. Thank you for being on the front lines of integration.
Yeah.
Thank you for the work that you do every day. Yeah, that's so nice.
Thank you, sister, for calling in.
Say that.
Yeah, it is. It is. I appreciate it. And we need the encouragement, y'all. We need the encouragement. We really do. I'm going to jump back into Ralph's story, Morgan. So he was working for the United Nations. He was working closely with Eleanor Roosevelt. He had helped to shape the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But in 1947 is when he both faced his greatest challenge and when he really rose to the occasion to put him in position to win that Nobel Prize. The Arab-Israeli conflict was as brutal and as bloody as it is now and as complex as it is right now. This has been an ongoing for centuries and generations conflict. It was so bloody at the time, Morgan, that the person who was negotiating the peace was a Swedish diplomat named Count Folke Bernadotte, and he was assassinated for his role in even trying to negotiate. So I want you guys to imagine it was that deep. This man was going there, he was trying to negotiate, this Swedish ambassador and for the United Nations, and he was assassinated. And when he was assassinated, they tapped Ralph Bunche to step in and lead the negotiations. And against all odds, Morgan, he brokered the 1940. First of all, Ralph Bunche, this is a small fact, but a fact that I love. He really loved basketball. And he actually used basketball and the analogy of basketball as part of his brokering of the 1949 armistice with people to even bring in like the concept of like team and all sorts of other stuff. So who knows what you may know that might be the key piece of information that don't seem relevant, but is relevant. But he brought all his Black boy knowledge from Detroit, all his Black boy knowledge from UCLA and Harvard, and he brokered the agreement that ended the Arab-Israeli war. And the next year in 1950 is when he got the Nobel Peace Prize. And I want y'all just to picture this, a Black man negotiating peace in a room full of global powers who just a decade earlier wouldn't have even let him sit at the table because it was actually segregated. So Ralph Bunche used his diplomacy as a weapon, and he proved that peace could be an act of confrontation. Yet the criticism that he got from W.E.B. Du Bois, from Paul Robeson, from Malcolm X, it was significant, and also it didn't deter him. He didn't stop his work at the negotiations that he did for the Arab-Israeli war. He didn't stop when he got the Nobel Peace Prize. He turned down high-profile political roles, including he was actually offered, I did not know this, but this is so powerful. In 1951, he was offered the job of Secretary of State, but he declined the job of Secretary of State because he said that it would compromise his principles. And he said instead of taking the job, he was going to meet Martin Luther King out in the streets in Selma. And he hightailed himself on down to Selma, and he marched with Martin Luther King and those folks down in Selma. And he said, for him, it was a question of, and this is another thing that we talk about a lot, it was a question of what he was going to say yes to and what he was going to say no to. And so he said no to a lot of the kind of more academic opportunities that came. He said no to a lot of the government opportunities that came. And he actually, Morgan, quietly and deeply got heavily invested in the civil rights movement, got heavily invested in organizing in his community and his neighborhood and using his skills in that way. So I loved telling that story because to me, it is, when we're talking about negotiate or confront, I've thought about Martin Luther King, certainly, and Nelson Mandela, right? And those two pathways. And certainly I thought, and I think a lot of us have thought about the more modern story of like Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. And yet, if you really go back, even I was reading back on Nelson Mandela, after he got out of prison, after he got the Nobel Peace Prize, he did negotiate. And he says this, he was like, no, I confronted when I needed to confront. And then when it was time, he sat down at the table and he deeply negotiated to build a new South Africa. And so I like the story of thinking about there is a
Vanessa,
time.
this is the answer. Yes, go ahead, girl. That's good. That's what I was about to say. There's a time. What you saying?
So there's a time to confront and a time to negotiate.
Listen, that is the answer for every single episode. If you are feeling the tension, if you're like, God, which tribe am I in? Am I tribe negotiation, tribe confrontation? You are tribe yes and. And like, it's going to require us to flex skills when we are in the fight for our lives, which do not be confused, sisters. We are in the fight for our lives, and the enemy is not a political enemy. It's not even a historic enemy. It's not even just a spiritual enemy. I mean, I'm telling you, everything, we are here because we have survived all these things together that have come against our people. We have a particular kind of resilience, and with that momentum, good evening. With that momentum, we have to like lean into life expectancy. We're dying shorter lives than women of other races. And it's hard to pinpoint where that's coming from. Is it coming from the stress of not making as much money as somebody next to you? Is it coming from the GMO food? Is it coming from deep loneliness? Is it coming from lack of like ability to exercise or motivation? Like, where is it actually coming from, this shortened life expectancy? And I'm saying this, as we lean forward to what is the clearest measure of justice, our ability to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Joy and justice is what we call it at Girl Trek. As we're leaning forward, we are going to have our tools sharpened from both ends of all of these spectrums. Sometimes we got to raise our fist. Sometimes we got to extend it in allyship. Sometimes we got to be ratchet. Sometimes we got to be respectable. Sometimes we got to perform like Cab Calloway and be excellent. And sometimes we got to participate in building the culture in the streets. It is yes and. That is the thesis of this entire 21 days. And some of y'all had it on day 1. Some of y'all had it on day 5. I'm just understanding right now that I have to figure out how to flex either parts of this when it's appropriate. So I'm so glad that Ralph Bunche is a great example of that. That Harry Belafonte is a great example of that. That so many of the people, Sade is a great example of that. That she was able to flex both. She could be in the band and she could be in solitude. And so like thinking about how we each really massage those muscles in areas that have been atrophied in our lives. If you're not speaking up for yourself, practice speaking up for yourself. If you talk too much, turn your microphone down sometimes and be in silence, right? So thinking about the duality of life as we sharpen our philosophy and our blueprint for life is really what this whole series is about. And these are examples of people who do it well, Vanessa. And when you were telling that last story about Martin Luther King, I was laughing so hard. I was so glad I was on mute because we have a trucker. We have a trucker named Gail who lives in Teaneck, New Jersey, and her mama named Miss Jones. And Miss Jones used to be my neighbor. And Miss Jones is famous, and she was like one of the original AKAs. Okay, she has passed on. Rest in peace, Mrs. Jones. And when I used to come over to my ex-husband's mama's house, she used to be like, Morgan. And she would come running from across the street. And she loved to tell me her stories from Black history. So she had this story about Martin Luther King. I think they went to Boston University together. And they had this kind of like salacious ride from Boston to New Jersey because Martin Luther King had a job interview. And she was like, and you know, Coretta was my friend. It was like, we had to go because he needed a ride. And we came on down to Jersey. He had that job interview. She goes, but Morgan, I'm so glad he didn't take that job. She was like, what if he had taken that job in Jersey? And Vanessa, I'm just thinking, what if we had taken that job in Jersey and we have a real purpose in our lives? Do you understand what I mean? So like this idea that you have to choose, you said something so powerful about Ralph Bunche, that you have to choose like how you are negotiating life, how you are confronting life is a really powerful thing. So I was just chuckling to myself, rest in peace, Miss Jones, and shout out to all the truckers whose mamas know some famous people. Are you there, V?
Oh, sorry, I am here. I was talking. I was on mute. Thank you for sharing that, Morgan. And I love I love the story that you just shared. I love Gail's mama story. And mostly I love that you anchored in the fact that we are even doing these stories and moving to save our lives because, and I want to just end this in terms of Ralph Bunche's life. I hate ending here, and yet it mattered to me when I understood this about him. He suffered from years of deep exhaustion because of the intense diplomatic work that he was doing. It physically took a toll on him. And he died at only 68 years old. He suffered from diabetes. He had kidney issues. So his health felt, and I was like, dang, he died at only 68 years old. And like so many Black men, in particular, Black women too, obviously that's a girl trek, but our Black men too are like dying from diabetes and kidney issues he's so early. And I don't want that for us. And so I'm just thinking, and I was thinking, by the way, it wasn't even probably the UN. It probably wasn't even negotiating peace. It was probably his daddy leaving him when he was 13 years old. And then however he moved himself from both his parents dead at 13 to how got to UCLA. How do you move from UCLA to Harvard? How do you make it on a racist, in a space of such deep racism across this country in a time of deep racism to get a PhD? Like the cumulative impact of all of these things is what I was thinking about when I was reading about his death. He died in 1971. He was 68 years old. He died at Presbyterian Hospital in New York. He's currently buried in the Bronx. So shout out to all of our women who are walking in the Bronx. He's buried at Woodlawn Cemetery there. And just like Morgan mentioned, there are a lot of institutions. There's a lot of institutions named after him. Are there? I assume so.
A lot of people buried at Woodlawn. Yeah. Somebody should do a Black History walking tour there. Shout out. That's some good programming. Somebody do that and invite the rest of the community. That's great. It may be creepy, but it's kind of great. That's so sad. That's so sad that he died so young. And you're right. I love the way that you articulated that. And there's a sister that we know named Dr. Nadine who talks about something called adverse childhood experiences. And it's ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And if you feel like what Vanessa just said resonates with you, you should look into that work because it's true. What happens at 13 can lead to diabetes at 60. You know what I mean? And so thankfully and thank God, so many sisters out there, I could name a whole list of them. Althea is the first one that comes to mind, that are really thinking about ways to heal us, like somatic ways, ancient indigenous ways, medicinal ways, all these different ways to heal us and release us from some of the childhood trauma so that we can breathe fully, right? And let that out. Let that pain out. We can negotiate the peace in the Middle East, but we can't negotiate the peace in our bodies that say that our parents left us and abandoned us. You understand what I mean? So I loved how you said that. And then when you were talking about Lucy Parsons, the other theme here is premature death and despondency and exhaustion. But the other theme here is actual violent takedown of some of these people, right? So when we think about, there have been several implications. Lucy Parsons' house burned down, Benjamin Banneker's house burned down, and his library was stolen too. Ain't that crazy? His stuff was stolen too, out of his house on the day of his funeral. So we just got to be careful out here. We have to protect each other. We have to build communities that are supportive and safe with one another. And mostly we have to move forward in deep, 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 deep love, y'all. So that it kind of don't even matter. Just keep on moving in deep love. Our team tried to tell me that yesterday, and me and Ayana, we was like, we don't know if we're there yet. Like our whole street team was like, y'all. I was like, how y'all feeling 2 weeks after the election? And Cynthia come on and she praying and she like, listen, because we are prepared for a time like this. Girl Treks team's so positive. And then Yolanda come on and she talk about, listen, we've been doing drills. Now it's time to get in the streets. So, they just so positive. And I was just like, I'm going to try. Try, y'all. So if you like me, you're going to try. The only advice I can give you is just keep on keeping on, keep on loving, keep on putting one foot in front of the other, keep on drawing close to the people that you know and trust, because that's where God is, y'all. That's where God is. This is fun.
I love that, Morgan. It's a great way for us to end today's conversation. In fact, and I'm going to end back with Peace Be Still, James Cleveland, just to because I know, even for me, I love these conversations. At the end, I'm like, oh, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about this. So whatever y'all are thinking about out there, especially around where you want to confront things in your life and where you need to negotiate and how you're going to practice radical self-care and rest as you do it, I'm just going to offer you this song to close us out and just remind you that we will be back here tomorrow at the same time, at the same place. We're doing a good job, y'all. This was day 13. It's you don't have to catch up. You can jump in anytime, literally tap in a friend, tell somebody, think about a girlfriend or a friend or somebody you know who just needs community, who just needs support. And this is the unexpected answer to that. You know, you're grappling with, what do I do? How to help my girlfriend? Just be like, girl, just come on to this call at noon Eastern time. And I think it would really help a lot of women out there. So please help us to organize, y'all. And I'll see you tomorrow. I don't have anything else, Morgan, do you?
Nope. Bye, everybody.